And Matt Spears is a principal consultant with Nintex Promapp for North America. And I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Matt, if you are ready to go.
All right. Looks like it is loaded now. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. What I want to do today is give you an idea of what Promapp is and how we fit into the rest of the offerings that Nintex has. So no doubt most of you are familiar with the Nintex automation platforms and how you can use those to pursue process improvement through automation and optimization. Certainly, I think we could probably all agree that if your business is not seeking after those things, namely optimization and improvement, then you're probably regressing as a business, and that's not a good thing. What I want to do, though, is give you a clear picture of hopefully how Promapp fits into that and where it fits in logically in terms of the sequence as we're pursuing improvement and optimization through process automation. So if we're going to talk about that from a logical standpoint, if we're going to optimize something, be it through automation or some other means, then I think it goes to say that we should understand what that is that we're actually pursuing automation with. So I think if you're familiar with working with the line of business and automating processes on their behalf, probably part of what you do is at least spend some time interviewing them or talking to them about the work that they do so that you can understand how to actually build a workflow to support that. And so we view Promapp as sort of a solution that can be owned by the line of business where they are not just at the point when it's time to automate, but even a long period of time before that, where they are documenting their processes in a clear and concise way, where those processes are constantly evaluated and updated and kept relevant through continuous improvement, and where we can actually go through and start to intentionally and systematically identify within those processes that are already documented what are the right points for automation, so that when it comes time to build workflows or to use any of the other Nintex offerings to help optimize a process, we have a good solid foundation and starting point from which to do that. Okay, so from a high level, that's what our goal is to come in to be that sort of that first step in the process improvement journey, which is process documentation, process design, and then not only how do we do that once, but how do we make sure that that process stays relevant, stays up to date, so that the line of business can use it and get value from it, and that the automation technicians of the company can come in and leverage that information to better build automation solutions. So that's where we see Promapp fitting into the overall Nintex portfolio. So let me sort of give you an idea here in the time that we have of some of the features and functionality of Promapp. And hopefully you can, as we're going through this, start to see how your organization could benefit from the use of this. And Andrea mentioned this at the beginning, but I would encourage you, please do ask your questions either through chat or save them to the end. We're going to have a Q&A session, and I would love to hear your feedback or comments that you have. So with that, let me give you the high-level overview of the tool. So Promapp is a cloud-based process management platform or process design platform that Nintex offers as part of our process improvement suite of tools. And since it is cloud-based, the idea would be that all of your users at your organization would have access to a single repository where they could confidently go and look for up-to-date relevant process information. Not only is it a repository, it's also a communication tool. So for example, I'm logged in to my Promapp site as a junior accountant. And because the system recognizes me as having a specific role within the company, it's going to point me to specific process information, and then also it's going to channel to me specific notifications relevant to my role at the organization. So for example, I can see that as a junior accountant, next to my picture here, I have a link for processes I'm in. So the system's going to consolidate, and it's going to say there are 16 processes that you are a performer of because you're a junior accountant. So essentially it looks in the process database for junior accountant as a performer, and it links those in one central location. So this is really a good feature for a new starter or for someone who's changing roles in the organization. This is a great way to give them an introduction to what the expectations are for their job. Right below that, you're going to see these different notification ribbons. And these notification ribbons essentially communicate to me critical changes that I need to know that keeps me up to speed with the work changes or the design of the work changes related to my role. So for example, if one of these 16 processes were to change that a junior accountant is responsible for, I would see a tick on this notification ribbon for process changes. Likewise, for document changes, new processes, or any types of process reviews that I'm responsible for. So we want to make this the interaction and the feel of the site very similar to some of the easy-to-use technologies that you all are using every day. So for example, when you go to Google Chrome and you can browse through your viewing history, we want to do the same thing here. So if I was a couple of days ago looking at a process or a document that was really helpful to me, I just can't remember the name of it, I can go to my recently viewed area and start to see that. I can start to also favorite processes or documents that are relevant to me as I'm using the information that's here. So I can start to customize this to really reflect what's valuable to me as an end user. And then additionally, we're very search-driven, so you can imagine if you're rolling something like this out enterprise-wide, there could be thousands of business processes that need to be documented at the organization. And it might be daunting to try to click through different layers of folders that organize those processes and find the one you're looking for. So oftentimes it's easier just to do a quick search for those processes. And so you can do a keyword search, and you get a quick search results drop-down. It's going to start to pull in process groups and actual business processes that are relevant to the keyword that you searched for. Now, with that, I do want to show you what a typical high-level process classification framework might look like for an organization. So instead of diving right to a business process through search, I'm going to go in and start to navigate down from the highest level. So think about what I'm going to show you as organizing processes by various buckets or by high-level category. Most companies do this through functional departments because it just makes sense to sort of think along those lines. So for example, human resources, finance, health and safety, IT, these are high-level functional departments that most people think in when we start to pursue, okay, where can I find process information? Well, if I'm in health and safety, I'm going to look for a health and safety folder or a health and safety page, and I'm going to navigate there first. Okay, so it makes sense to show process information or to organize process information this way. Also, though, what we want to do is we don't want to stop there. We want to encourage organizations to start to show at a high level how do different functional departments work together to produce value. So how do different departmental processes hand off to one another ultimately to produce value for the customer. And so what we also suggest is that organizations not only organize processes by functional department, but they start to organize processes through value streams. Okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you an example of what that might look like. So develop new products and services is not a functional department at a company. It's actually a service that company offers. So when I click into here, I don't just see a list of processes. I actually see a high-level process flow. This is what we would call an end-to-end process or a value stream view, where I can see that there are 3 different distinct departments: quality, operations, and marketing. And I can see how they work together ultimately to produce the value of developing new products and services. So what Promapp allows you to do is to start to pull those traditionally siloed business processes together and show the end users of the company how their work impacts other people downstream from them and how they're actually impacted by people upstream from them. So really starting to break down some of those communication walls that traditionally would exist in an organization. So that's really what we're after here in terms of trying to generate collaboration and communication amongst the different teams. Now, up to this point, I haven't actually showed you a specific business process, and I'm going to do that now. And so as a user, if I were to look at this from the value stream view or the end-to-end view, I very quickly have an understanding of what's happening. Okay, I can see, and within 10 or 20 seconds, I can digest this information and check out the flow of how this process is functioning. And I could choose to get more detail on a specific area. And so, for example, if I were to choose to go into define product concept, and I would click into this, and at this point, I no longer see processes linked together. I actually see process steps linked together. And so in Promapp, we call these process steps activities. And I can tell it's an activity because it's a box with this blue header with a number in the upper left-hand corner. And those activity boxes are going to be segmented in horizontal swim lanes. And this is very, very much traditional in terms of process flowchart design, where you have horizontal swim lanes, and those swim lanes are designated by the role that is responsible for performing these activities. So we followed that sort of traditional design here. And as a user, I can, again, the goal here being rapid comprehension. We want, for example, if we have a fleet of product managers at the company, we want every product manager to be able to open this process and very quickly see where they're responsible for performing actions, and to understand how that fits into the flow of the process. So if I were comparing this versus perhaps a long 2 or 3 page text-based procedure, hopefully we can start to see how this facilitates understanding and comprehension with that frontline person much easier in a quicker way than sort of maybe the old representation of some of that process documentation. But we don't really stop at this level, because as helpful as this might be to users of the company, it doesn't really tell me how to do any of this stuff. So I know that, for example, as a product manager, that I'm supposed to define the product concept, but I don't really know how to do that. So we don't want to stop at this layer. We want to go one layer deeper, and this would be what we call task level detail. And so task level detail explains at a more granular level how to perform the activities that are mapped on the process, and those are designated by A, B, C, and D, so on and so forth. We can also supplement this task level detail with various guides or documentation, screenshots or videos, anything that we think is going to supplement that end user and get them performing this activity step more efficiently. So for example, if I go into activity 1 here, I see that there are clear task instructions to a document, or 2 documents, a guide and a form that supplement different tasks, but also there's a video here. So as an end user, I can play this video and I can see, okay, what's the information that's being portrayed out to me? What do I need to know as a user? And when I'm done with that, I can close out of the video, having absorbed the information that I need, and I'm right where I was when I opened the video. I haven't been redirected to some other website. I haven't been asked to go search some other database. We're inserting that information right here in the flow of work for the end user to leverage as they see fit. So this is the basic layout of a process. Now, this process doesn't build itself, and it doesn't manage itself. It's actually done by individuals in accordance with a governance methodology. And so with Promapp, the way that the tool is designed and the way that we coach organizations in process management is that every process at the company should have an owner and an expert. Those are 2 people who work together to jointly build and then maintain this process documentation in the long run. And so there are a few ways that they maintain process information. One would be through calendar review dates. So every process that you create is going to have automatically assigned to it a standard review date. And every time this review comes up this date comes up for review, these individuals would receive a dashboard notification up here at the top of the screen that would indicate to them, I have action to take in terms of reviewing this process and making sure it's still relevant. Additionally, though, we don't want to just wait for this review cycle to come around before we're asking the question, is this process as good as it should be, right? Looking towards things like automation and optimization. So what's the other component? So the other component, in addition to the standard review, is opening up a channel for other people who use this process to start to leave feedback on it. So for example, maybe the product manager or a project leader in a different region, different from the two people who built this, they have input that might make this process better. We want to give them the opportunity to come in and start to suggest improvements and essentially give them a voice for making this process better. And what that does is every time an improvement suggestion is left in the process, the owner and expert would be notified on their dashboard and via an email from Promapp that would go out to their email inbox. And the feedback would also be logged here in the feedback tab of the process. So again, we're not managing, just similar to how we have all of the supplemental information, these guides and videos embedded right here in the process. We're not managing things at multiple locations. We're not managing feedback in some separate Excel sheet. We're managing it right here in the process. And we're actually creating transparency because other users can start to click in and see what type of feedback has been left. So this is really helpful for getting people excited about continuous improvement, excited about looking for ways to make processes better. And especially if you're a company where Nintex automation is known and it's leveraged, this is a great way for people to start to look for those automation opportunities and feedback and say, hey, it would be great if we had a workflow to support this because this is a process that's really painful for me. So instead of coming into if you're assigned a responsibility for implementing 10 workflows, instead of just kind of wondering, okay, well, where do I go from that, and looking for the first process you can get your hands on, we can start to have some empirical data, at least qualitatively, from people who say there's some pain points here in this process, and I'd like for a workflow to be built to support that. So that's what we want to encourage through feedback. And I want to just show you how this would work if we're talking about, instead of building a workflow to support this, we're talking about let's say a simpler change where someone's making a suggestion where we want to insert a new activity between 2 and 3 just to provide a little bit more information about what happens here. How would we go about doing that? So the feedback would come in, the owner and the expert would receive that notification. They can log into Promapp and go into this Edit tab. This is where all of the process modifications take place. So this is different from some of the free-form process design tools where you're dragging and dropping shapes from a toolbox onto a blank canvas. That's not the way that we have built the editor, because if we're looking to scale this out across the organization and we want to get more frontline people involved in building and maintaining processes, we want to make it as easy for them as possible to build the process. And really the hardest part about building consistent processes in one of those free-form design tools like a Microsoft Visio is getting the maps to look the same from person to person. And so sort of taking away that drag and drop from a toolbox approach really goes a long way in creating consistency in the look and feel of the process maps. So all of the edits are done here in this outline editor. And so, for example, if I wanted to add an activity in between 2 and 3, I could do that fairly simply. I'm just going to click here and I'm going to choose to add an activity. And it's going to add a new activity between 2 and 3, which would become the new 3.0. And so I'll just say new activity. It's going to be performed by the product manager. I'm just going to add a couple of blank task level detail items here. Then we're going to save this process. And what's going to happen is we're going to go from version 187 to version 188. So Promapp is a tool where you have complete version control and version history control over the process changes that are implemented. So now I can see that just by adding that new activity in, the system has assigned that activity and created a visual box in the same swim lane assigned to the role that I designated to perform it. To the point of this change history and change control, this is all, again, captured right here in the process. So we don't have a share file with 188 separate Visio files for this process. What we have is a single link with multiple historical links embedded within this tab. So I can scroll all the way down. If I wanted to, I could go all the way back to when this process was originally created, and I could see that in, I think it is in April of 2010, this process was initially created, version 1.0. And if I want to, I can click that. It's going to open this process in what we call a permalink or a mini mode view. And I can see this process looks much different than it does right now. So we've changed it a lot over time. And I can see here this is historical version 1. So as a user, I start to have really great visibility in terms of how the process has changed. And then as a leader at the organization, I can start to get an idea of, hey, are we really making our processes better over time, or are we just changing for the sake of change? So you start to have the ability to go back and look at some of that historical data here. So in addition to some of those features, some things that we want to be able to point out on a process map are certainly, I'm going to come back to the automation piece, but we want to certainly capture things like active time and wait time. So as we're developing and designing a process, by design, how long should this process take? This is going to give us a really great indication, version over version. Are we making changes that are decreasing the process time? Or are we making changes that are increasing the process time? Right? If it's increasing the process time, I think we could probably safely assume the process is not changing for the better. The same with process costs. Are we increasing the cost or decreasing the cost? And so if we were to come in here and start to tag other things, like perhaps systems, we can get an idea visually and say, as an end user, I need to be ready to use at this activity SAP and SmartDraw. These are the two systems that I'm going to be leveraging as I'm performing this activity. This also gives IT visibility into what types of processes are using what technology. So if I have a shutdown or an update of a technology that's going to take place, and SmartDraw is going to be offline for an hour on a Friday afternoon, if that's when the update takes place, I can go into my systems database, and I can find SmartDraw, which is in this list of systems built into the Promapp site, and I can run a systems report for that. And I can start to get an idea, if I make an update and the system goes down for an hour, what processes are going to be impacted, and where in those processes are we going to see the impact. And so you start to have great visibility in terms of, okay, we make these changes, who are we going to be impacting? So it certainly helps with change management from that perspective. But also, back to this concept of, if we're documenting processes, we certainly should have improvement or optimization as a goal in mind. And so how do we do that? Well, we would do that certainly through feedback, but I think maybe more foundationally, we would do it through pinpointing those specific locations in the process where we see opportunities for improvement. So we have a Lien Tagging feature that would allow the process editors to go through the process and start to assign a tag at a specific point in the process where they see an opportunity for improvement. So for example, 4.0a, I've used the IPA hashtag here, and I can say this is a point where we would like to have some intelligent process automation created or a workflow created to support this. And so you can create as many custom tags as you like, call them whatever you want, consistent with how you speak about these things at your company, and then apply these strategically and intentionally across your entire process database. And similar to what we just did with the SmartDraw systems report, I can go into my tag database and I can run a report if it's time to, let's say we just purchased a new bundle of workflows from Nintex, or it's time to roll some more workflows out. Where do we start? Okay, I can go find this IPA tag, and I can run a systems report. I can say, well, where have our process editors identified opportunities for automation? Maybe we should start there. So you get a nice list of those processes and where in the process those individuals think a workflow would be a good addition. So that gives you a sort of starting point to build that prioritization list from. So going back to the process here, as we're sort of rounding out our time before we get to the Q&A, know that this process is one of, like I said, potentially thousands of processes at the company. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we do want to be a tool that facilitates process optimization. We do think that the first step in that is documenting the process so that you can see it, understand the flow, and you can go through and intentionally identify those bottlenecks or places that would benefit from automation. But we also see some benefit to the line of business day to day in terms of having quick access to relevant, up-to-date work instructions. Because let's face it, a lot of the processes that companies perform, not every step of that process can be automated. And so until we reach that point down the road, we're still going to have value in terms of showing the frontline employee clear work instructions and giving them access to that information in a simple and accessible way. And then leadership would then have the ability through Promapp to look holistically at the entire health of the process database as it relates to the entire organization. So at the dashboard level, I have the ability to see high level, how many total processes do we have, how many of those are published and up to date, how many are out of date and need to be reviewed, how many are in progress. And this is actually a great tool as well. So if you're pursuing automation and you're looking to automate, a handful of these out-of-date processes, probably not a great thing to do. We probably want to make sure that that process accurately reflects how work is being performed in the field before we go and start to build a workflow to support it. And so it gives you an idea of what processes are ready for that and what processes aren't. I can also start to see, total process views and start to gauge the level of engagement that our frontline people are having with that process information. And I get a group level breakdown here as well as I start to look through how I've classified my processes. I can start to see how are we trending in views, how many feedback items do we have, how many published or out-of-date processes do we have. So we try to make this information what we see as sort of critical information in understanding the overall health of the organization's processes available through this dashboard. So with that, there's, we could continue to go on and talk for quite a while longer. The goal today was just to give you an introduction to what the tool does and how it can support really what you're doing already with the automation technology that Nintex offers. One thing I would like to add is addressing a question that I've received a lot since we've been acquired by Nintex, and that is, at what point will I be able to take, if logically, Matt, you're telling me this is the first step towards optimization, it's documenting it. At what point will we be able to convert the work that we do here in the process design tool and convert it into a workflow that we can modify and apply through Nintex automation? That is something that is being pursued right now. We are actively testing that feature. So the idea, at least conceptually, would be that there would be a button on this screen that would allow you to essentially take this information and create a workflow shell in your process workflow designer in Nintex that you could then use as a baseline for customizing a workflow to support that. So that is something that's coming along with some other integration capabilities. I would just ask you to stay tuned to this group, and this is probably going to be where you're going to hear about that information first.